Now and now. Okay. All right, you will have to please bear with me. I was just giving this amazing opportunity of a job last night. So I'm a little less than prepared. But I hope that you have all had a wonderful day. I hope you have enjoyed your opportunity to hear some of the amazing speakers and panelists that we've had with us today. It's certainly been a treat for myself, and I hope that all of you feel the same. I hope you enjoyed your lunch. And I want to invite you to the Faith and Culture track this afternoon. We're very glad that you chose this track and chose to be with us today. Today we're going to kind of talk about a combination of the ministries that Interfaith Mission Service does. So this is a combination of our race and culture ministry and also our faith and spirituality ministry. And so we're going to hear from some experts in the area on some insights on how they've successfully delivered some of these programs to their community. We're going to take a break at about 2:45. So as you can see, we have 5 wonderful speakers up here. They will each be speaking for about 20 minutes or so, and then we're going to take a break at 2:45 and promptly come back after about 15 minutes. So our first presentation today is on building the beloved community. So we're going to hear from Mr. Kenny Anderson and Delois Smith on this topic. First, we're going to hear from Kenny Anderson. Kenny is a nationally certified counselor with over 30 years of experience in the mental health profession. In January of 2013, he was appointed to the Multicultural Affairs Office of the City of Huntsville after spending the last 16 years at Calhoun Community College. Since 1990, Kenny has been the host and producer of a weekly live radio show called Second Chance, and this is broadcast on Oakwood University's channel. He currently hosts a television show as well called Impact, and this shares information about community bridge builders. He has received numerous awards and recognitions over the past 2 decades for his community service. His wife, Sonia, is a contract officer for the Army Contracting Command in the Express and Strategic Service Division. So please welcome Kenny to the stage as he talks to us about creating a beloved community.
Thank you very much. I'm privileged to be here as an attendee as well as a presenter this afternoon. Had a phenomenal experience last night with Brian Stevenson. I think we probably could have packed up and left after that, except that I know that there are many people that have put a lot of time and energy and invested in making this a wonderful experience for all. The topic area that I was given this afternoon was the idea of creating a beloved community. So I'm going to be speaking in the context of my role as Multicultural Affairs Officer for the City of Huntsville. First of all, I wanted to ask, how many people are aware that such an office exists in Huntsville? You know the name of it? How many people know what I do every day? Okay. So let me start there, and I want to give you the context in which I come to this particular office and what I've tried to do with this office in the time that I've been there. It was about 1.5 years ago when I started this job. I had been a mental health professional for many years in this community, worked in a variety of different settings, had also worked as an educator for many years and worked at 5 schools, 5 universities and colleges in this area in a variety of different capacities. I was relatively on cruise control at the time that I received a call from Brenda Martin, who was the Multicultural Affairs Officer at the time, and we were talking about and celebrating her retirement. Somewhere in that conversation, she began sharing with me that she had been talking with the mayor about the possibility of finding a replacement, and that she knew somebody who she felt was uniquely qualified because of the work that they'd been doing in the community over the last 20 years. Something in the back of my head said she can't possibly be talking about me, but she was. And the more she kept talking about this opportunity of this office and how this office had really brought a lot of vibrancy to this community had created an opportunity for people across the spectrum to have a seat at the table where everyone was respected, I started thinking, boy, that sounds like a really cool opportunity to do some community engagement. And so after assessing the whole process and recognizing that I had 16 years invested in my retirement, that would this be the best thing for me? And learned that the state system transferred to the city system. And so I wasn't going to lose anything there. I say that because providentially I was praying about this move because it was a big move. But I thought that when I made the decision, it was the right move. And a year and a half later, I have to tell you that it has been the most phenomenal year and a half of my life. I'm 57 years old, so I'll put that in context. The most phenomenal year and a half of my life. This job. We live in an amazing city. And for those of you who have not recognized that yet, and I know I'm preaching to the audience, to the choir, for those of you who don't recognize that yet, every single day I have an opportunity to see the greatness of this city. The greatness that for some people is only imagined, the greatness that for some people is only a product of their vision, the greatness of what our mayor decided to do when he came into office about 6 years ago and established this office. This is relatively a brand new initiative for our city, but it is a very timely initiative because of the culture of our community. We live in an international community where, as the Lord said earlier, over 100 different nationalities represented at UA Huntsville alone. And we incorporate Alabama A&M University and Oakwood University and all of the many other dynamics out there. Within the city, we've counted about 80 different nationalities who reside here in our city. So Huntsville truly is an international community, and with that comes the need to acknowledge everyone, to respect everyone, to affirm everyone, and to assure that everyone has a seat at the table. And essentially, that's my job and that's my role. Every day, it's my privilege to work in this community with a variety of different groups, organizations, individuals, associations, and otherwise to make this city a better city, to promote issues of social justice, to promote a better understanding of the differences that exist in our community, and recognize that difference doesn't equate to deficiency. In fact, difference represents opportunity. And the more that we see that in others, the further we will go. So my job involves working with all of the civic organizations in this group, all of the economic entities in our community, the educational components, the faith community, the neighborhood associations, all of the many different ways in which people differ culturally. And that's why when I wake up in the morning ready to go, no 2 days are the same, and I'm excited to do the work that I do. In fact, somebody once said that if you find a job that you love so much, you'll feel like you never work a day in your life, and that's exactly the way I feel. My work week goes from Sunday to Saturday in many cases, and I never notice the difference. That's because this community has so many opportunities in order for people to come together and work together and make this community the community that we all dream it could be. One of the biggest challenges I had coming in, though, was that when I would talk to people about the fact that I was the multicultural affairs officer, they would, not like this audience, say, well, what is that? I didn't know we had something like that in the city. And so I set out to create a community in which people would be connected through conversations as well as social media. We launched a Facebook page, and that Facebook page, for those of you who are on Facebook and are not connected yet, is City of Huntsville Multicultural Affairs. I've become exhausted over the years with people who say to me, I didn't know that was happening. I didn't know my culture was being represented. I didn't know I had a voice. I didn't know this activity was going on. Well, I've created an opportunity for people to no longer have that as an excuse. Because if they sign up to the Facebook page, we keep people aware about what's going on in our community. We launched a newsletter, and that newsletter comes out weekly. I was blessed last summer to have an intern who worked specifically on content as far as the newsletter was concerned. And so because he was there and able to provide support for me, I'm a one-person operation, by the way. He was able to provide support for me. We were able to make this a weekly effort and a weekly investment where the community could be informed about what was going on in the community in which they owned and are a part of. We currently send that to 3,000 different households every Tuesday morning at 8 o'clock. And in that newsletter, we provide information about what has happened in the city, what is happening in the city, and what's about to happen in the city, all from a multicultural perspective. And I may need to back up for 1 second because another part of this conversation that I often have, and when Dolores talks, she's the director of diversity. A lot of people talk about diversity and multiculturalism in the same context, and there really is a difference between the two things, even though there's a lot of overlap and some integration. The distinction I make is simply this, as far as the cultural aspect is concerned. When I talk about culture, I'm talking about the ways in which people differ across various dimensions. And those dimensions include dimensions of faith, education, socioeconomic status, disability, sexual orientation, and on and on and on. So wherever those things are happening, I talk with those people about what they're doing. I ask those individuals to be a collaborative part of whatever we're working on in the community to make it a better place, and invite them to have a voice and a seat at an open table where everyone is appreciated and accepted. In fact, I wasn't on a job a month, and one of my very first appointments was a man who had called me and said he'd like to come in and speak to me. And I had no idea why he was coming in, and I didn't ask him. As I now have so much going on, I try to filter what's going on. I didn't ask him because I knew his family. And so I said, yeah, come on down, we'll talk. So when he came in, he pulled out a laptop projector, sat it on my desk, and started discussing the issue of the nuns, the N-O-N-Es, and the fact that he was concerned that far too many of our city council meetings start out with Christian prayers. Now, you know, everybody would not have been ready for that conversation. And it's interesting and amazing because he laid out some things to me in a very objective way that made lots of sense with regards to how our city operates and how people feel included or excluded in the community. And for us to be a municipal government and have as part of a sign that we have in City Hall that says, we are one Huntsville, we are an inclusive community, and then not find ways to include all people would cause me to feel derelict of my responsibilities. And so we had a wonderful, very productive conversation that led to an assessment of the prayers that we've had in City Council over the last 10 years. And with that information, we went back and talked to the city attorney, and we talked to the city council members, and we talked about working to diversify the city council meetings as far as prayer was concerned. This is what we're doing in the Office of Multicultural Affairs to affirm all people. We work very closely with the gay, lesbian, transgendered community that many people still don't know exists here. It's a very large, very sizable community, very active, very engaged community. Mr. James Robinson, who leads that initiative, is a strong advocate, works very closely with many initiatives that we have going on through my office. And we're very proud to do that because, once again, we are designed as an office to represent all people, to make sure that all people have a seat at the table. Regardless of ideology, regardless of philosophy, regardless of intent, regardless of who people appear to be, we simply want to make sure that everyone feels included in our community. We also, from a social media perspective, started a Twitter page because we realized that some of our younger generation likes Twitter and Instagram. So again, we wanted to be inclusive across the board. We didn't just want to focus on one aspect of social media as far as this was concerned. We have 30 neighborhood associations in the city of Huntsville. Neighborhood associations are older communities where they don't have some of the more contemporary homeowners associations where, thank you, where grass is cut and people are concerned about security and utilities and other kinds of things. Those 30 neighborhood associations are dispersed throughout our community, and anyone can start a neighborhood association if they have not by talking with me and working through my office. From the mayor's perspective, we feel that the work that gets done in our community doesn't come from this big, large group of people that does something. It comes from people working in communities and small groups, representative groups of people who have an interest in having an impact in their community. And the thing that I'm probably most proud of since we started this journey about a year and a half ago is that Bhavani Kakani came to me one day and said, have you heard about the Compassionate Initiative? And I said, I have not heard of that. The International Campaign for Compassionate Cities and the Charter for Compassion. If you've not seen this, you can go online and check it out at www.charterforcompassion.org. This charter is simply based on the Golden Rule. Treat others as you'd like to be treated. And what this organization did as a result of a TED Talk where Karen Armstrong, the founder, said, what if people really put the Golden Rule to practice in their daily lives? What would happen as a consequence of that? Well, she won the grand prize, and from that she launched the Charter for Compassion, and she challenged cities around the nation and around the world to become more compassionate cities. Huntsville took that challenge, and we pulled together as a result of about 3 different focus groups from people all over our community to talk about, is this something that you would be willing to support, something that you'd be willing to be engaged in? And from that group, we came together and launched our own compassionate initiative here in Huntsville. It's called Compassionate Huntsville. And last September, our mayor and city council signed a joint resolution declaring Huntsville to be a city of compassion. I want to stress that this is an aspirational thing. It doesn't mean we've got all our problems figured out. It simply means that we want to be a city where people are interested in moving towards that goal, embracing that vision, working together as people who are different, and affirming the value in all people, recognizing that if we really did treat one another as we'd like to be treated, what a difference and what an amazing community this would be. Huntsville, as of today, is the only city in the state of Alabama that has been named a city of compassion by the Charter for Compassion in Seattle, Washington. In fact, the Charter's director is the cousin of the Bruce Martin that someone referred to earlier, who is the pastor of 100X Church. And he's come to our city twice now because he's so impressed with the things that we're doing in the city that are working to bring people together. My office is committed to continuing on this path, and we invite people around our community to be a part of that. You can also find a Facebook page on the Huntsville, it's called Compassionate Huntsville. And you can find that Facebook page as well and join us in our effort to move Huntsville towards being the city that we know it can be, a beloved community. Thank you.
Thank you, Kenny Anderson. Everyone, please join me one more time in thanking Mr. Anderson. Thank you so much. And Kenny spoke several times about the Golden Rule, which I just wanted to point out. Each of you in your welcome bags today, we put in there a poster on the Golden Rule. So you have that where you can take that. Jane, can you hold that up for everybody? It's beautiful. It looks like that. And so each one of you have one of those to take with you. Next, we're going to have Ms. DeLois Smith talk to us. Ms. Smith is going to talk to us about multicultural engagement training. DeLois Smith is the Vice President for Diversity at the University of Alabama in Huntsville. She joined UAH in 1984 and has held progressively responsible positions in the Division of Student Affairs. In 2009, she was appointed by the UAH President to head and develop the Office of Diversity and Student Support Services. DeLois is a graduate of the University of Florida with a BA in psychology, an MA in educational psychology, and she is a licensed professional counselor, a nationally certified counselor, and a board-certified clinical psych therapist. She is also a qualified intercultural administrator, which she's going to talk to you about today. She serves on several campus and community boards, including the Interfaith Mission Service Board. We're very, very lucky to have Ms. Smith as part of Race and Culture Ministries on our board. So please join me in welcoming Ms. Lois Smith to talk about multicultural engagement training.
I want you to give me just a second, and I'm going to set up a PowerPoint presentation. And then I'm going to ask my colleagues on the stage if they could just move down to the seats because I want you to see the videos. I guess, Scott? Okay, there we are. Let's hope technology works, and so far it's not. It was a minute ago. While I'm trying to get this to work, I want to tell you a little bit about my work at the university. And how I came to Huntsville. My husband and I were a part of a movement in where I became a student, where I was a student at the University of Florida. And you heard me say earlier in the panel that I knew that there could possibly be a time when people of all faiths and all backgrounds and all nationalities and all races could come together. But I just never saw it. And so I became very disillusioned. But luckily, when I was at the University of Florida, I did find such a group. Now, a lot of people heard about the work that was being done there. So in 1979, there were some people here in Huntsville, Alabama, that came there and asked if my husband and I could move here to Huntsville, Alabama and try to replicate that. So I had already made a promise to myself that wherever I was, I would be a part of such a group, and if there wasn't one, I'd get one started, because I knew it was possible. So my husband and I came here in 1979 at a congregation that was all Caucasian. We were the only African Americans. And yes, when we came, brace yourselves, we were actually told, or it was asked of congregants there, how long are these ends going to be coming here? So now, because we knew how innovative and progressive this was, we were already told before we left where we were that when you go different places and you begin to try to pull people together across racial, ethnic, cultural backgrounds, you're going to get pushback, and we knew that. So even though you know that, when those type of things are said, it still hurts. But we knew what we wanted to do, and so we came in '79 with some colleagues of ours who are Caucasians. So we began to do outreach in the community, as well as on the two campuses, Alabama A&M University and the University of Alabama in Huntsville. Eventually, I got a job there, and because of my background and training, I started out in counseling. And a matter of fact, that's where Kenny and I met. And so I started out in counseling and began to see some things that needed to change on the campus. And what I learned is the more you start telling administration, why don't we try this and try that, eventually they put you in charge of stuff. So eventually I worked up to the area being over VP for Student Affairs. And then in 2006, there was a long-running case in the state of Alabama called Knight versus Alabama. And that was where historically black colleges and universities in Alabama, HBCUs, sued the state of Alabama. And they sued the PWIs, predominantly white institutions, which included UAB, UAH, University of Alabama, and Auburn. That lawsuit went on for 21 years. Maybe you didn't know about that. How many of you knew about Knight versus Alabama? It went on for 21 years. It ended in 2006. And then in 2006, the judge in the case gave a directive to the PWIs and said, you will have on your campuses a chief diversity officer. And that person will have jurisdiction over faculty, staff, students, and administrators to be sure that diversity initiatives are taken care of on the campus. At the time, I was SEAL VP for Student Affairs. And then the president gave me a call, and he said, we are going to start on this campus an Office of Diversity, and I want you to head it up and develop it. Now, that took me aback because in this type of work, it is not easy. And I knew a lot of it was going to be political. But I knew that when I was counseling, I could help students one-on-one. And when you are in student affairs, you're crafting policies and procedures that may affect a few. In this position, however, you do policies, procedures, interventions that affect hundreds and thousands. So I took it on, and one of the directives that I was given by the president was not only would we have diversity initiatives on the campus, but we wanted the University of Alabama in Huntsville to be a lead college and university as an outreach to the UAH community, to be a support, to help with workshops, to do training, to be there for advisement, and so forth. So that's what I did. Began working in that office, and then eventually had an administrative assistant and a few other colleagues. Now, what I'm going to show you is just a little bit of a type of a PowerPoint that I put together, and there's different versions of it. This one is to help congregations understand how they can begin to do what myself and my colleagues did in 1979, to teach them how to reach out to different ethnicities and cultures and individuals around where you are in order, if you wish to, look precisely at how you can integrate your congregation. We try to help you learn how to do that. It is not an easy thing. It's very difficult, but it can be done. So I want to show you just a little bit now. Like I said, this can either be an entire one-day workshop. I can craft it where it's 30 minutes up to an hour, but I'll show you some of those pieces. Let's see if we can do that. Now, this is a picture of Central Church of Christ. It didn't look like that when we first came. When we first came, and if you look, I don't know if this will show this, it doesn't show. But up there, you know, I am. If you see the lady on the very far right, on the very far left, who is Caucasian, she's holding an African-American baby in her arms. And if you look just to her left, that's me. So now, we have multicultural people from different countries, different races, ethnicities, cultures. We have interracially married couples. It's a pretty diverse group of people. I mentioned to you that Kay Campbell did a piece for us a number of years ago called The Rainbow Congregation. And we do work this out every day. We have our issues. Some people want to listen to different type of music. You know, we have people from the Caribbean, they want to listen to that type of music. We have other people who want to listen to old spirituals. We have other people. So, and we have situations where we had individuals who may not like the way something is done. We have a leadership group who comes together when these issues come up. We sit down and we talk through them. We bring people in when we can't solve a problem, but we make it work, and we make it work every day. But you have to work at it. But we determined that we could make this happen. I'll continue to go on with the video. Now, it's an interactive workshop and designed to raise awareness of participants and to teach cultural differences. I won't go through all of these because I don't want to take up all the time, but I do want you to look at this particular graph that I mentioned earlier. This is the latest information from the Pew Research Center, and I want you to look at these graphs. On the very far right, the graphs are the first 50 years in the United States. From 2005 to 2010, that is the progression of where things are moving in the United States. And I mentioned before, by 2040, the Latino population in this country will triple. By 2050, we will be a non-majority population in the United States. The groups that are growing the fastest, at the very top is the green for Asian, right below that are Latino or Hispanic, after that is Black, and then Caucasian. Now, since we do this as congregations, mosques, temples, churches, we would be very remiss if we do not pay attention to what is happening. And I mentioned before, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. So we need to be preparing for the changing demographics in our country. One of the type of things that we did in a workshop was I was called on at one time to help a congregation here in Huntsville where there had been a diaspora. The congregation was in a particular community, and the neighborhood changed where most of the Caucasians moved away, and the congregation found itself surrounded by Latinos, African Americans, and Asian Indian. They wanted to continue to reach out to the community, but wasn't quite sure how to do that. So what we did was to come in and do something like what I'm going to show you. Let's see, we continue to do that. Give me just 1 second. We would show them videos like this, and to help them to see how fast our country is changing. And just give a look at that. Because a large part of what you do with congregations is to teach and inform. Because if we know that we're continuing to move to mega cities, then we need to change the way we outreach and how we do it. and just to help them to see how fast things are changing. Another part of what we would do is to teach the congregation how communication happens across cultures and ethnicities. We reference a book called Kiss, Bow, or Shake Hands. It tells you that you can learn a lot of the specifics about a country, about a particular culture. Then we do, the workshop would include them taking a test that is called an intercultural exchange. They take the test, it shows them what their individual propensity is toward interacting with different cultures, how they might be perceived by a certain culture, and how then to interact differently with that particular culture. A lot of that is done with quizzes where we break down into groups. We help raise the awareness of where someone might have what we call an implicit attitude test, to show that even though you may think that you may not have racial bias, when you take the test, it'll show you that maybe you do and how you need to deal with that. So I want to show you that in just one moment. To skip around a lot because it was a lot of slides, and I'm going to try to be mindful of the time. In this particular one about the implicit attitude test, and this will come further along in a particular workshop, it talks about how it is possible to consciously denounce racism and believe you would never willingly discriminate against anyone. But the implicit attitude test says at age 6, explicit and implicit race-biased attitudes are relatively similar. We're very young, and we haven't learned a lot of those things yet. By age 10, a dissociation begins to occur between explicit bias tends to decrease and implicit bias remains unchanged. And we talk a whole lot about how that happens over time because a child begins to learn to distinguish by watching their parents. But in adulthood, we become very proficient at it. We know what to say, when to say it, how to say what, and how not to say something. But what we don't understand, which is what is also done in the workshop, is we say that what we don't understand is 68% of our communication is nonverbal. It is the eyes, the tone of the voice, the way your face looks, your body language. Even though you may not be speaking verbally, you are speaking, and that person picks up on what they see. 35% of your communication is the tone of your voice, and 84% of your believability is in the tone of your voice. Only 7% of your communication are the actual words that are used. So 93% of our communication is never spoken. But we don't understand why we say, well, I don't know why they got upset. I didn't say anything, but you did. You spoke a lot without saying very much. And then again, one more slide would be the findings. These findings suggest, go back one, that in adulthood we get better at it. So I want you to, and I'll probably date myself a little, if you remember South Pacific, and it says you've got to be carefully taught. You've got to be taught to hate and fear. You've got to be taught from year to year. It's got to be drummed into your dear little ear. You've got to be carefully taught. You've got to be taught to be afraid of people's eyes who's oddly made and people whose skin is a different shade. You've got to be carefully taught. You've got to be taught before it's too late, before you're 6 or 7 or 8, to hate all the people your relatives hate. You've got to be carefully taught. A lot of those things are learned, and we help you individuals to understand maybe how that is done so. And sometimes every now and then we show up a very funny video, and this will be my last one. And this is a half day long workshop. So this will be the last one that I'll show. Just a second.
Hi there.
Hi.
Nice day, huh?
Yeah, finally, right?
Where are you from? Your English is perfect.
San Diego. We speak English there.
Oh, no. Where are you from?
Well, I was born in Orange County, but I never actually lived there.
I mean before that.
Before I was born.
Yeah, like, well, where are your people from?
Well, my great-grandma was from Seoul.
Korean. I knew it. I was like, she's either Japanese or Korean, but I was leaning more towards Korean.
Amazing.
Yeah. Hamshasina. There's a really good teriyaki barbecue place near my apartment. So I actually really like kimchi.
Cool. What about you? Where are you from?
San Francisco.
But where are you from?
Oh, I'm just American.
Really? You're Native American?
No, just regular American. Oh, well, I guess my grandparents are from England.
Oh, well. Hello, Governor! What's all this then? Top of the morning to you. Let's get a small tea. Double, toil and trouble. Mind the gap, beware Jack the Ripper. Bloody hell! Pip, pip, cheerio! I think your people's fish and chips are amazing.
You're weird.
Really? I'm weird? Must be a Korean thing. Fish and chips, pheasants, clotted cream, bangers.
But I'm just going back and forth on that. This is the workshop is made up of many things like that. It's very interactive, but it's to raise awareness. It's a lot of fun, and it's meant to help and teach. Then after we do that comes the hard work of looking at the demographics that surrounds your neighborhood and then helping you to know how to reach out specifically to those individuals. But it takes time. That picture that I showed you took pretty close to about 10, 15 years. The work was hard, but it can be done. As our country changes, those of us in the faith communities will need to be examples to those to whom we reach out to as to how this can be done. We are going to be hard-pressed to continue to explain to the world that is changing so fast why we continue to be segregated and that we choose to stay that way. So part of the outreach is to help communities. Another part is to continue to educate people on my campus. And right now we have an emphasis where we are continuing to diversify our faculty. So I'm involved in searches when they begin. And if a pool of candidates is not diverse, then I have been empowered to be able to stop the search until we can diversify the committee and look at diversifying the pool. It takes work, it can be done, and if you need assistance, need help, the Office of Diversity at the University of Alabama in Huntsville willing to help, and through IMS. There's my staff and I, Kimberly Crutcher-Williams is with our Office of Multicultural Affairs on campus, and we work very closely with Mr. Anderson quite a bit. So there's a lot of information, but that is what we're about, and that's what we do. And they won't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Thank you, and my colleagues can come back to the stage.
That was some really fascinating information. Let's give Miss Delois Smith one more round of applause for her great work. And like Delois said, she gave you a little bit of insight on the multicultural engagement training that they do. But we would love to get this more in the community. We had a couple of sessions of her training during our hometown pilgrimage, and people that attended those sessions just came out of their glowing rave reviews of the sessions. Can I get an amen, Jane? Okay. So they are wonderful. So we would love to conduct some more of those trainings, to have them in your organizations or your congregations. So like Ms. Smith said, contact the Office of Diversity or contact the Interfaith Mission Service, and we'll make sure to get that set up for you. Okay? All right, our next wonderful speaker doesn't need an introduction. He is so fantastic. I think you guys have heard him speak already. But Rabbi Rami Shapiro is going to be talking to us about creating a beloved community. So all of the theory that we've talked about so far, he's going to help us put that into practice and what we can do. So please help me welcome to the stage Rabbi Rami Shapiro. Thank you.
So, good afternoon. Your butts must hurt. So, we're going to get off them. I just want to make sure you have the handouts. One's paper, one's cardboard. You should have two. All right, we're going to talk about both of these things. You only got one? Well, Susan's still working on it. So the idea is, how do we create a beloved community? Well, I tell you what, you can't do it in this setting. Right? You can't do it in this setting. This is a power setting. This is a setting for people who are up front and people who are down in the pews. This is the way a church is set up, a synagogue is set up. This is a mosque is set up, temples, where you've got priests up front, the power people up front, the people with the word of God, the people who can tell you what the truth is, and you're just supposed to sit there and take it. That's not a beloved community. That's a hierarchical community. If we were in the gym, I was going to move all the chairs so we could sit in a circle. First thing you got to do is we got to make ourselves more equal. But I'm up here, I'm stuck up here, and we're just going to have to work with what we've got. So I tried to think of what were two things, to keep it simple because our time is so short. What are two things that we can do to create beloved community amongst ourselves? Because it's not just about, as important as what we've been hearing is, it's not just about that. The communities that are forming in the future are going to be temporary communities. They're going to be not flash mobs exactly, but people coming together for a specific purpose, for a specific time, and then dispersing. And how do you create a beloved community, a community of justice and compassion in a short amount of time that can be sustained while that community is working together? And I thought of two things that work. One is if we sing together, and the other is if we have conversations. So I want to introduce you to some singing, and then to a conversation around the idea of God. And I'll tell you why I picked that in just a little bit. So I want to start with... We won't go through all of these. Let me start with the first one, I am alive. I'm going to teach it to you, and then we're going to sing it. Because one thing we all have in common is we're alive, I'm assuming. Check your neighbor. Maybe they've been sitting so comfortably because they've been deceased for half an hour. I don't know. So check to make sure your neighbor is alive. This is how this one goes. It starts out like this is a Hasidic, Jewish mystical song translated into English. And it starts out like many of those pieces of music start out, just with die, da, da, die, da, da, die, da, die, 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 die. So try that. Die, da, da, die, da, da, die, da, die, 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 die. You're going to have to share the paper because we didn't have enough. Die, da, da, die, da, da, die, da, die, 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 die. So that's, we're going to start with that, but we're going to put words to it. So it's going to go like this. Die, da, da, die, da, da, die, da, die, die, I am alive. Die, da, da, die, da, da, die, da, die, die, I am alive. Yai, da, da, die, da, da, die, da, die, die, I am alive. I'm alive. So I didn't hear a thing. I'm assuming you're alive because I asked you to check. But let's see if we can get a little bit more noise. And you can give us a little percussion. In the gym, I was going to use the tables and we were going to bang on them in good Jewish style, but we'll just clap hands. I did it, I did it, I did I am alive. I did it, I did it, I did I am alive. I did it, I did it, I did I am alive. I'm alive. And then the song questions that aliveness. Because we've been talking about everyone in their silos, everyone in their labeled gender groups, ethnic groups. We haven't really talked about the LGBTQ community. I don't know why no one's brought it up. It's like maybe if that's a step too far, I'm not sure. But we haven't really dealt with that. But all those are just narratives that we carry and that we defend and that are abused, and then we get addicted to them, and it's all the stuff all the labels that we carry. But beneath all of that stuff, we're alive. So then the song says, okay, I'm alive. It doesn't say I'm a Jew. It doesn't say I'm a Christian, I'm a Muslim, I'm a Hindu, I'm secular, I'm humanist, I'm atheist, I'm whatever it is. It just says, I'm alive. And then it says, who is this aliveness I am? And then the answer is the Holy Blessed One. That's the theology of the text, that we are all manifestations of the divine. You can say we're all children of God if you like. I go a little bit further. I say we're all manifestations of God. But however you understand it, there's an aliveness that transcends the labels with which we burden ourselves and one another. So this is how it goes. I did it, I did it, I did I am alive. I did it, I did it, I did I am alive. I did it, I did it, I did I am alive. I'm alive. And who is this aliveness I am? And who is this aliveness I am? And who is this aliveness I am? If not the Holy Blessed One. So let's try it as if we were really alive, okay? Yeah, maybe you should stand up. That might help. If you can stand, please stand. Or stand in body or spirit. I did it, I did it, I did I am alive. I did it, I did it, I did I am alive. I did it, I did it, I did I am alive. I'm alive. And who is this aliveness I am? And who is this aliveness I am? And who is this aliveness I am? If not the Holy Blessed One. You can sit. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. We'll sing something else a little bit later. But when we sing together, we stop thinking about all the labels we carry, and we just become a choir. And each person brings her own voice, and they all blend together in a kind of harmony that creates this symphony of sound that can be so powerful, so beautiful. Communities that sing together have a leg up on this beloved community idea, because the music itself pulls us together. We ought to have in our church, synagogue, temple, mosque services, in my imagination, and we will probably, because the Pew study that you showed us, the beautiful, the graph with all the changing in the demographics, the religious spiritual demographic is changing even faster. With 1/3 of everyone born after 1978 in that spiritually independent camp. They don't care that your church is ethnically diverse, racially diverse, open to the LGBTQ community. They care that you're open to the Spirit in a much broader way. One of the things that's driving the whole spiritually independent movement is the fact that our kids and our grandkids don't get our hang-ups. 75% of Americans, in the privacy of a poll, will say, so take that back, 75% of Christian Americans in a private poll will say that they're not sure Christianity is the only way to get to heaven. Wow, that makes almost every pastor in my town flip upside down in fear. Because they have the only way. Each one of them. They don't agree with each other. It wasn't too long ago I went to this thing I called the Battle of the Baptisms. And it was a bunch of different pastors. There's a Lutheran, a Presbyterian, a Baptist guy, some other. They're all men. And they're all these different denominations of Christianity and Protestantism. And they were having this discussion. Who has the real baptism? Is it full immersion? Is it dunking, sprinkling, I don't know, water, pistols, I don't know, all the different ways that John the Baptist may have done it. But whatever it was, which is the real one? And they all said, except the Baptists, that you know what, it didn't really matter. But the Baptist guy said, oh no, you are absolutely wrong. If you join my church, you have to be rebaptized. Because there's only one baptism that's going to get you into heaven, and it isn't the Lutheran one. And so people are like, oh, wow, what is that, And they're all trying to be nice to each other. But what I like when the tension comes up. That's when it's interesting. I don't want to just sing Kumbaya. I want to see them bring the knives out. So I'm in the audience. Everyone knows that I'm the only rabbi in town. I'm one of a handful of Jews in this town. And so somebody says, well, what happens to a non-believer when they die? And everyone turns and looks at me. I stand out. And then the pastors just, they didn't want to answer. And the Lutheran guy finally stood up and he looks at me and he says, Rabbi, it's nothing personal. And I said, no, it's okay. And he says, you're going to burn in hell for all eternity. And the moderator says, well, it's a good time to take a break. So they took a break. And then these two other pastors came up to me. I don't know what denominations they were. They came over to me during the coffee break. And they said, that guy is just really conservative, and there's a liberal position. And I said, okay, what's the liberal position? He said, well, let's just be clear that the Lutheran guy's position was what they called the eternalist. I'm not up on all this stuff, but it's the eternalist position. And that means if you don't believe the way they believe, then you will go to hell, and you will burn in hell for all eternity because God loves you. And then, that's the conservative. But the liberal position is called the annihilationist position. And that is that I will go to hell when I die, and I will burn and be tortured by the God of love. But not forever. Eventually, my soul will be consumed, and I will no longer be in existence in any way, and the suffering will stop. Now, that is liberal. I do buy that one better. If those are my two choices, I'll go with the annihilationist one. But my thinking is, why don't we just drop this thinking altogether? Maybe it's time we got over the fear and the hell and the fire and brimstone and the torturing of one another. Why do we have that? So the other handout you've got is called Gomu, is how you pronounce it. God of my understanding. And this is also part, we're using our workshops for double duty here. This is another workshop, piece from another workshop, where we take a look at our ideas of God and faith, the language we use, and the implications of that language for our understanding of one another. It's one thing for a church community to come together and to cross racial divides and ethnic divides. It's another thing for a community to come together and not believe that the other, whether the other is Christian or Muslim or Catholic or Jewish or Hindu or Buddhist, is somehow demonized and is going to be punished in hell for all eternity. And the only reason we punish them in hell only is because we can't punish them now. Right? If we used to, when religion was different, when it had guns, some of them still do, right? But when Christianity had guns or knives or bows and arrows and spears, they took care of the infidel in this life, as well as the world to come. But you can't do that in America. It's not kosher. But we still have the same belief. It's just that's going to happen in the next life. So the Gomu thing says, we believe that, and you may or may not believe this. This is a handout, and the idea is to take this back to your churches and synagogues and have discussions around this to see what people think. So can they agree to these things or not? And mostly they can't, which is the point. We believe that truth is one, and different people call it by different names. That's from the Hindu text, the Rig Veda. That some of these names lead to justice and love, while others lead to injustice and fear. And that it is incumbent upon those who speak of God to discover and own the implications of their understanding of God with regard to the pursuit of truth, justice, and love. We got to know what we mean when we use the word God, and we have to know what the implications are for people who may use the word differently. We believe that people should be free to walk in the name of their own God, but not free to impose their God on anyone else. We believe that the Tao that can be named is not the eternal Tao. Tao is the word that, from the Chinese tradition, the Tao Te Ching, in the Chinese translation of the book of John, in the prelude of John, in the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God, the Word was with God, the Word was God. In the Chinese, they say Tao. They don't say Logos. Logos is the Greek. They don't say Word. Word is the English. They say Tao. Tao is the Word. Tao is made manifest in all nature, you and I. But according to the Chinese tradition, any Tao that you can name, any theology you've got about God, cannot be actually what God is, because you thought it up. The whole idea behind this, we don't have to go through all of these, but the whole idea behind this is that theology is made by people. Nobody understands God. God didn't reveal God's own true self to anybody. Every person struggles with what that ultimate is and comes up with whatever they come up with, and then it includes and is shaped by the madness of their own psychology. So by the time we're 6, 7, 8, 9, we're already, that racism is instilled in us, that fear of the other is instilled in us. We're taught to demonize others. Well, that goes in religion also. Not too long ago, I live in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. That's the heartland of we are scared, technically the word is shitless, by Muslims. They scare us. We've had a Muslim community in Murfreesboro for 35 years, but they had a tiny little mosque in a shopping center. And when they built a big mosque, we went nuts. By we, I mean Christians. Not all Christians, but it was the Christian community that led us in the anti-Muslim charge. And we were the city that CNN featured, and Soledad O'Brien came down and showed us what was happening with the mosque. And people were shooting at CNN and the imam while they were trying to film the thing. It's very scary. So a couple of people were called out in the newspaper, myself, a couple of Methodist ministers, and the imam, because we had spoken out against violence. And someone had written into the paper saying, we demand that these people put it in writing, that we condemn all violence done in the name of God. So we got together, we had coffee, it took 30 seconds. We wrote a little statement, we said, we, the undersigned, condemn all violence done in the name of religion and God. And we didn't even finish our coffee, and we had finished this thing. It was easy. It was no-brainer for us. And then I said to them, this was so easy. Could we add 6 words? We, the undersigned, condemn all violence done in the name of religion and God, and I wanted to add, in this world and the next. I thought, well, why not? If we agree that we don't believe we should be killing each other because of our beliefs differences in this world, why do we believe that God should be doing it for us in the next world? Let's just wipe it all out. 6 more words. And they said, absolutely not. Right? They got so passionate, the pastors and the imam. And I said, why not? And they said, because that's God's business. If God wants to condemn you to hell for all eternity, or almost all eternity if you're a liberal, if God wants to condemn you for all eternity, that's God's business. And my response was, no, that's your psychology. That's your mental madness. That's your theology that you invented to make yourselves feel okay by separating yourselves from the other and demonizing the other, lacking the power to do much about it now, and giving that power over to your imagined idea of God who's going to torture them in the world to come. We made that up. We made up all theology. Go talk to a Catholic theologian. You can talk to them till you're blue in the face. They'll never discover that Krishna is God. All right? They won't. You can talk to any imam or rabbi, and they're never going to discover that Jesus is actually God incarnate, because we don't buy that idea. These things are all made up. Not saying they're bad. They have great beauty. Look at the art and music, all that stuff. They have great genius embedded in the stories. But when we take the story as history, when we take these things so literally that we use them as clubs to bang each other over the head, we are in big trouble. And that's the history of humanity. It's built into our DNA. I just read this study of chimps. We're mostly chimp. And chimps, I think the number was, male chimps, 75% of the male chimp population will commit a murder against another chimp in its lifetime. And that's us, right? Bonobos are different. 3% of male bonobos commit murder. And the difference is, according to this one article I read, chimps are ruled by male chimps, bonobos by female bonobos. Patriarchal societies are dangerous. Matriarchal societies, less so. Not saying they're perfect, but less so. So we've got to find out what our God idea does to us. What does our God idea demand of us? What's our theology? I was at this church in Aspen, Colorado, and it's a very liberal church, and it's all about universalism, and everybody's the same, and we're all about interfaith, and everyone comes together here, and they sang this beautiful hymn, and they sang all the verses. Too bad, unfortunately, in verse 3, after all this beautiful universal stuff, verse 3 said, "And we thank you, God, we praise you, God, for the day when everyone will realize that Jesus is Lord." I'm going, and I stopped the service. I said, "What are you talking about? You just invited all these people, and now we're singing Jesus is Lord." And they said, "We sang what?" I said, "Read it," because they weren't paying attention. We have to pay attention to the language if we're going to create a beloved community and weed out the language that is anything but loving. And that's hard. I bet that's definitely as hard as bringing in, different people from different races, challenging your own theology, suggesting that you don't have the answer, that the answer is not actually to be found, perhaps, that it's sharing the quest and the seeking and the questions that really matters to us. So in this Gomu thing, I wrote, "We commit ourselves to ending this evil by recognizing that God is always a cultural narrative." Not the Tao that's true, not the one, I happen to be a believer, but I'm not a theologian. I believe that there is an ultimate reality of which you and I are all a part, but I don't label it. I don't pretend to know what it wants. I don't pretend that it has a specific diet. I don't pretend it chooses a specific people or a specific land. I don't think it says these are the good guys and these are the bad guys. I don't think that's what it's about. My God doesn't do that. But of course, those ideas are also cultural narratives. So Christianity and Judaism and Hinduism and Islam, they're all cultural narratives. When we recognize that, we can go so deeply into the beauty of them, and we can simply say no to the madness of them. And that's what I'm suggesting we need to do. By rejecting all narratives and ideas about God that sanction misogyny, homophobia, racism, anti-Semitism, hatred, and exploitation of person and planet, and by promoting those understandings of God that call all humanity to do justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with your idea of God. Micah 6:8. Jim Wallace has the Sojourner magazine in the back, and if you subscribe to Sojourner magazine, which I urge you to do, they will send you a cover for your laptop. And it says, it's from Micah 6:8, it says, "Do justly, love mercy, walk humbly." They left out the most important part. With your God. The rabbis asked 2,000 years ago, it said, why does it say with your God? Why doesn't it just say walk humbly with God? And their answer is, because everybody's got her or his own God. And you ought to be damn humble about it. Because your God and my God differ. And if we're not humble about the fact that we know they differ and that we don't know which is true and that probably none of them are, if we don't have humility about our theology, we only have war and violence and misogyny and xenophobia. We only have violence. Because it's a war of the gods. And that war never ends. We have to understand more deeply the nature of religion, the nature of spirituality, how it evolves in human culture, the genius of it and the madness of it, the hope it offers and the horror it can provide. And that's the kind of conversation a beloved community needs to have. Not that you give up your faith. You just realize that the reality is so much bigger than anything you and I can imagine. And then you go back to singing. So we're going to sing one last song, and I think I'm probably going to be out of time then. The last one. We'll skip the Hindu one in the middle. It's all Sanskrit. I'm afraid we won't get to that, so I'm going to stick you with Arabic and Hebrew. I don't know if that's any easier. But this, I was at the University of Seattle with a Sufi sheikh, and his name is Dr. Ali Kianfar. He's a brilliant Iranian Sufi. And we were doing an interfaith Jewish-Muslim thing. And at the And we had about 550 people in the audience. It was a room like this. And somebody asked a question in the afternoon, so how do we create this Jewish-Muslim community? And Dr. Kian Fargas looked at me and said, oh, Rami, you can take that one. And I had no idea, but what came to me in the moment was I got my guitar, which I don't have with me, but I took my guitar, and I took two pieces of liturgy, one from the Islamic tradition and one from the Jewish tradition, and I put them together, and I'm going to teach it to you. So the first part is Arabic, and you'll have to forgive my Arabic. All right? No. How's your Yiddish? So, La ilaha illallah is, there is no God but Allah. The second half is, and Muhammad is his prophet. We're not doing that. Muslims do that. That's what makes you a Muslim. That's the shahada. That's the affirmation of faith. But La ilaha illallah, there is no God but God. Which means that whatever God is, it isn't the God that you and I can imagine. That God's too small. The Sufi tradition says, as I understand it, or as I was taught it, it's not simply that there's one God, it's that there's nothing else but God. You and I are manifestations of God. The chair you're sitting on is a manifestation of God. The papers you're holding are manifestations of God. There's only one reality. Call it Allah, call it Tao, call it Brahma, call it Great Spirit, call it God, call it Yah, whatever you want to call it. Whatever your name is, there's only one of it, and each of us is a manifestation. Our relationship to God in the mystical traditions, whether it's Sufism or Vedanta Hinduism or Judaism, whatever the tradition is, same in Christianity, the mystics all say the same thing, that we are all that God is like an ocean and you and I are like the waves of the ocean. We are God manifest in a specific time and place. And then the second half, after La ilaha illallah, is the Hebrew, Me olam ad olam ata Yah. From dimension to dimension, world to world, it's all God. So this is how it goes, and you can sing it with me once we get started. La ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah. Try that. La ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah. Again. La ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah. And then the second half. Me olam ad olam ataya, me olam ad olam ataya, me olam ad olam ataya, me olam ad olam ataya. So let's try that all the way through. La ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah. Me olam ad olam ataya, me olam ad olam ataya, me olam ad olam ataya, me olam ad olam ataya. There's one more part to it that I'm going to give you at the end, and that's how we're going to close, but I'll tell you the rest of the story. So I did this. 550 people are just doing this. It's powerful, powerful stuff. And everyone's feeling this connection, and we're hearing the mystical teachings of Islam and the mystical teachings of Judaism resonate together to remind us of this perennial truth that everything is a manifestation of the one thing. And then it's over. And Dr. Kianfar's got to get back down to San Francisco where he lives, and he rushes off. And I'm just cleaning up, packing up the guitar, all this other stuff. And all of a sudden, one of his students comes over, and he says, "How dare you do that?" Dr. Kianfar is so angry that you took the first half of the Shahada, La ilaha illallah, there is no God but God, and you used it with some Hebrew thing. And it's not your place to do that. He is furious. And this guy went on and on and on. I felt I was heartbroken. I mean, this is a wonderful guy. I knew him before. I knew his wife. I've interviewed them for a video thing I did. And I thought, oh my God, I didn't have any intention of hurting his feelings or or abusing his tradition or anything like that. So I felt terrible. So nothing I could do. He left. I went back to Miami, Florida, where I was living at the time. And then a little while later, about a week or so later, I get an envelope in the mail from Dr. Kianfar. Those are the days when a lot of people were sending anthrax around. So I gave it to my secretary to open. And no, I didn't have a secretary. But so I opened the thing up, and there was a letter. And I thought, oh, this is going to be awful. He's going to, I'm ready to be just yelled at, and I feel terrible. And I open it up, and he says, Dear Rami, I loved what we sang at the end of the workshop last week. I had to run out. Can you get me a CD? Because I want to make copies and send it to all my students around the world. He loved it. His disciple was afraid of it. You can tell who's authentically spiritual by the people who are not afraid about crossing boundaries. You can tell who is deeply God intoxicated by the people who aren't afraid of other people's ways of articulating the divine. You can see who is not afraid of faith by people who are not clinging to the narrowest little understanding of faith. So if we're going to create beloved communities, we have to create communities of the beloved. We have to realize that the person you're sitting next to is a manifestation of God. In Christianity, we would say, can you see the Christ in that person? I want to go farther than that. It's Matthew 25. Can you see that person as Christ? In India, when I go to India, I'm part of an Indian community there, and we bow to one another. We say namaste or namaskar. I bow to the divine within you. And when I teach the Swamis there, I say, that's a terrible translation in English. Don't say, I bow to the God within you. I say, bow to the God that is you. To recognize that I am a manifestation of God, and so is everyone else. Then you can treat one another according to the golden rule, because you realize that everyone is a single self, as the Hindus would say. We're all one reality. So let me teach you how to do this with the last piece, and then I am done. When you get to the Ataya, right, that it's all God, you turn to somebody who's near you, and you may have to get up and move around, but you go to someone and tap them lightly. Lightly is the operative word here. On the which chakra is this? Somebody help me out, I forget. But the third eye, right? You tap them lightly on the third eye to wake that person up. And they do that to you too. They tap you on the third eye, you tap them on the third eye to wake you up to the fact that it's all the divine. That if God isn't everything, then God is not infinite. And if God is infinite, then there's no limit. God is everything. Those we love, those we don't love, that which we like, that which we don't like. Isaiah 45:7, God says, I create light, I create darkness, I make good, I fashion evil. God does everything because there's only God. But we can work in a way that brings all that around to holiness if we dare to see it for what it truly is. So let's try this last one again, and then you reach over and at the Ataya part, all right? La ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah. Me'olam ad olam ataya, me'olam ad olam ataya. Different people, you got to like that. Don't keep pounding the same head. Go find another head. Me'olam ad olam ataya, me'olam ad olam ataya. La ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah. Me'olam ad olam. Find another head. Me'olam ad olam ataya. Me'olam ad olam ataya. Me'olam ad olam ataya. Thank you very much.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. I have never heard such a good speech in so long. That just hit my heart, hit the truth that I hope we all know. Thank you. Please stand. Please stand and give Rabbi Rami one more big round of applause. That was truly amazing. Thank you for sharing that message. Thank you. That was awesome. Okay. We are now going to begin this segment of this track where we talk about how IMS has started putting together some ministries over the years. I talked about before, this is a combination of faith and spirituality ministry area, and it's also race and culture ministry area. So we have several programs within those ministry areas that we've implemented in the community over the past couple of years. So we're going to start with one of those before the break. Reverend Carol Landry is going to talk about One Huntsville Diversity Dinners. Then I'll come up and we'll take a short break, and then we'll continue after the break with several more of those community ministries that we're doing. So we're going to talk about One Huntsville Diversity Dinners. They were born from the need to sit down, eat with others, and bring an educational forum to the people of Huntsville. Because what have we found? What better way to get to understand someone than to sit down? And what do we like to do the best? We like to sit down and eat. So we combine the two. So Carol Landry is going to give us a short presentation of the One Huntsville Diversity Dinners. Please welcome to the stage Reverend Carol Landry.
Thank you. See if this is pointed the right direction. So can you hear me when I'm standing like this? Okay, so I have a little thing here they filled out, and you'll be able to go online and find this, how you can begin to create a One Huntsville, a One Madison, a One Birmingham, a One Biloxi, whatever, and you can find what I'm going to be telling you, you can find it online. So the first question on here that I have is, why do something like this? What is the point? And a very important point that has already been made in this panel is when Mr. Kenny Anderson came forward and talked about the Office of Multicultural Diversity here in the city of Huntsville. The idea for that office began at a One Huntsville dinner. It began because different people had been looking around, seeing what do other cities do, what can we find from other cities that might be of interest to Huntsville, and we invited the multicultural officer from the city of Chattanooga to come and make a presentation. And everybody there went and said, wow, it sounds like this is something that Huntsville, the city of Huntsville, needs to be thinking about. And so out of that, they began looking at the other stakeholders here in town, had a lunch, began talking about it, and it took about maybe a year and a half, I'm not quite sure the full length of time, and we ended up with this very, very important office here in Huntsville. But it began because people from all different areas of town came together to be able to talk, to get acquainted with each other. One Huntsville program has been going on. We've had a couple of different iterations. The first one went on 10 or 12 years and then took a break for a while. And this second time around, it's getting close to 20 years that we've been doing this one. So it brings ideas, it brings people together to talk about things across so many different sectors, and so you meet people, you network with people, you're breaking out of that small group so you go to a church or a synagogue, you have your friends, One Huntsville brings people across those. So I come from Unity Church, and so then I go back to my congregation, and I have other groups. I go to that group, and I begin to share the ideas, and I bring those ideas from those groups to this group. So if you want to begin to develop and create, having this one city kind of program is a very marvelous process to do. And so what do? Well, first of all, you have to think about, if we want to have a dinner, all the reasons that Brianna just said, okay, we need to think about the food and where we're going to have it. And I do have to tell you that this has become far more complex in the last 2 or 3 years than it ever was before, because we have people who are gluten-free and people who can't eat this and people who are vegans and people. So you really have to find a very good buffet. Or as we have moved to, at least this year, people to bring their brown bag dinner, and we are meeting at the library, the main library downtown, in their main auditorium, and people bring their brown bag dinners, and we sit around, and for the first 45 minutes, we have an opportunity to socialize. So get acquainted with each other, and then we begin a program, and the program is usually related to something that the people at IMS, as we brainstorm together, think might be important, or somebody may have come to us and asked us if they can present a program. So I'll tell you, if you decide you want to do this, getting your programming is really very easy. You put out the word that you are a venue where people can come and talk about things that are important to them that are also related to the community. So the issue is this of community-wide interest? So we don't usually have much that's related to faith at these dinners because, you know, faith has these different processes, except that last month our presenters were a Wiccan couple. Now, why is Wiccan of community importance to the city of Huntsville? Well, it's because in our diverse presentations for opening the city council meetings, we had a Wiccan high priest come to offer that invocation. Now, the interesting thing was, it was the second time he was invited to do that. The first time he came and did it, and everybody loved it, and it was fine. The second time, I don't know what happened, but there was all of this hoorah and discussion. I understand, since I don't have a television, but that we made actual national news. Now, doesn't that sound disruptive? Well, actually, yes, it was. But you know, the conversation that has developed in Huntsville has opened the awareness of how important it is to have all the diverse people come together. So, yes, we've had this conversation. That part's been opened up. But what is this Wiccan stuff? Okay, let's have credible people come and explain it to us, which we did. Next month, we will have Alabama Rise will come and talk about what some of their issues are, what's happening in the larger state of Alabama. In December, we will have a program on Faces Before Stereotypes and kind of looking at how do people of different faiths celebrate their holidays. Or hopefully we'll have somebody from the Free Thought Association. Okay, you're not Christian, but what do you do about Christmas? How do you do that? So asking them that question. In January, we will have the 50-year Big Picture program from the city of Huntsville coming and talking to us. So you can begin to see how this kind of programming can bring information that is important across a wide spectrum. What do you need to do this? Well, you need at least 2 or 3 committed people, and those committed people need to have some connections out there in the community so they can let people know, they can make invitations, and they can begin bringing together their calendar. And I do have to tell you that basically One Huntsville in all these years is a no-budget program. So you find a place to meet that is free, whether it's a restaurant that has a space that you can make use of if you eat there, or someplace like the library. One of the things we have discovered that it does need to be a neutral place. We would have no problems with a free place to meet if we could meet in churches. Churches are more than open to have different groups come and meet there, but it does need to be neutral because there are people who are not comfortable in going into something, even though this isn't a religious program. So you need to look at that, and your steering committee being the kind of people that can go out and find those kinds of things, make those connections. I already told you the format for the dinner, which is basically pretty simple, but I left out one part. So the very beginning of the program, we have a few minutes where, first of all, we introduce people, and people have an opportunity to say who they are. Are they just there because it's their interest, or do they represent somebody? And then they also get to make announcements. Here's what's going on in my community that I want you to know about. So that usually takes 10 to 15 minutes. So again, you get that word out in a face-to-face way. It's very important in our culture with all this electronic media and everything. We really get to meet people, know who they are, and have an exchange of information and find out why is this important to this group and how can we make those connections. So having that 15-minute time of people being able to stand up and talk about what's going on in their community. So how do you let people know about this? Well, if you have a really good answer to that, please come and talk to me afterwards. We put it out with our email list. We are totally blessed by Kay Campbell, who puts that announcement into what's left of our newspaper, letting people know what the program is going to be. We do have a Facebook page. I think we have a Twitter page. Did you? Working on that. So what your steering committee needs to have or to find is somebody who is kind of knowledgeable about that process and how you can do all these electronic things, which means you need to get into that younger generation who knows how to do those kinds of things. But also word of mouth and putting it out to the different congregations and things like that. So publicity is probably your most difficult thing in some ways, but once people begin to know it, what we have is an established day of the month. It's always the third Tuesday. You don't remember the date? I can remember it's the third Tuesday. So having some things in place that people don't have to have very specific details. It's also good, you think, well, why don't we just meet in different places? Wouldn't that be more interesting? No, you need to have an established place. And because we've had a little challenge over about the last 3 years, we've moved a couple of times. So now we've been at the library since June, but there's still a lot of our people who haven't gotten that word. Hopefully we're not going to be moving from the library anytime soon, and they're doing a wonderful job of supporting us. You need some form of evaluation. What's working, what isn't working, and as part of that evaluation is ideas for programs. It's amazing how many of the people who come will say, oh, I know about this group, I know about this particular program. And they'll write it out, and now you have an amazing contact to reach out to. So how has this worked over the years for us, and why is this important to IMS? IMS has interfaith mission service. So we have some, and you'll hear about this later, how do we educate people about faith? How does faith get involved in social justice? Well, it is also important because how do we build beloved community? We do that by bringing the community together, to be able to connect with each other, to be able to have face-to-face interaction. We've heard several different times, how do you make a difference for people? You make a difference by getting close to them. You sit across from the table, or you sit next to them where maybe you're bumping elbows while you're eating. You sit close enough that you can lean over and make a comment when you agree with something, or you can hear those little comments so you go, oh, these people are thinking the way I do. So from my perspective, who's been the person who's been facilitating this for the last couple of years, and the perspective of Frank Broyles, who's kind of the person who's, not kind of, is the person who started this and remains the person who does those community contacts, there's very few things that are more important. There are many things that are at least as important, but there's very few things that are more important than creating this venue, bringing people across all the different sectors of town or the area. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Reverend Landry. Let's give Carol one more round of applause. I can't even say your name today. I've said it every day, and I can't say it today. So we're going to take a short break. It is a little bit after 2:45, so I'm going to ask that you come back 2:55, so that's about 10 minutes. The restrooms, everyone knows the restrooms are down. When you go out into the hallway, they're down to the right. We will have refreshments in the gym, so there should be some cookies, and if there's any leftover dessert, that will be there, and some drinks. So please take a break, get something to eat, and if you will be back in 10 minutes, we'll continue talking about some other ministry areas from the Interfaith Mission Service. Thank you so much.